Okay, so get this right. Today, we're tackling infidelity.
Ooh, juicy.
It's hush-hush, it's taboo.
Definitely.
But it's more common than we think.
Oh, for sure.
And we're using not just Friends, the audiobook to like really get into it.
Yeah.
The nitty-gritty of it all.
Awesome.
See the vulnerabilities that can actually lead to affairs.
It's amazing how much this book like reveals about the psychology of affairs, you know?
Right.
Like it goes way beyond those simple explanations we usually hear.
Totally. And it's not just about catching cheaters, right?
No.
It's about the why.
Exactly.
The motivations, the everybody involved, the betrayed partner, the unfaithful partner, heck, even the affair partner.
It's fascinating how the book like emphasizes understanding that story of the affair itself.
Yeah.
And not just for, being nosy or whatever, but because facing the truth, even when it's like super painful,
Yeah.
is actually crucial to healing.
It's counterintuitive, right? Like
Yeah.
you'd think ignorance is bliss. But they tell this story about Melissa, whose husband, Morty, had a one-night stand. And even though it was, I'm sure, incredibly hard to hear, she needed to know the details.
It's more common than you'd think. Lots of betrayed partners have this like intense need to know the specifics.
Yeah.
It's like the unknown is just like breeding anxiety,
Oh, yeah.
suspicion, filling in those gaps with reality, however painful, can actually be like powerful,
Yeah.
for letting go.
So it's not just about like morbid curiosity.
No.
It's more about taking back some control.
Exactly.
In a way, the book outlines 3 stages of disclosure: truth-seeking, information-seeking, and then finally empathic exploration.
Wow.
It seems like moving toward empathy is key.
Absolutely. There's another like compelling story
Okay.
about Georgia who she discovered her husband George's emotional infidelity like at a Christmas party.
Oh, no.
Their initial conversations, filled with anger and blame.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But over time, they were able to shift, towards understanding.
Right.
And remarkably, they rebuilt their 32-year marriage.
32 years. Wow. That's amazing. It speaks to their commitment
Yeah.
and the power of actually communicating, I guess. But it also kind of challenges this myth, right? That only unhappy marriages have affairs.
Right. Not just Friends debunks that, like, completely. It introduces this really interesting concept, a relationship vulnerability map.
Okay.
It's meant to, like, identify potential weaknesses that can make a couple susceptible to an affair.
Interesting. So instead of labeling a marriage as like, good or bad,
Yeah.
this map helps us look at the specifics.
Exactly. Goes beyond these, like, oversimplified categories.
Right.
And helps us see the nuances. It highlights that even, like, seemingly happy marriages can have vulnerabilities.
Okay, so what are some of those vulnerabilities? The book talks a lot about unmet expectations and disillusionment
Yeah.
as major factors, right?
And I thought it was really interesting how they pointed out a difference between men and women here.
Apparently, unfaithful wives, they're often aware of their unhappiness, like way before an affair even begins. Whereas unfaithful husbands might only realize their own dissatisfaction, like only when they're comparing it to the affair partner.
It's a fascinating gender difference.
Yeah.
It reflects how men and women often approach, relationships and expressing their emotions differently.
And it's backed up by some pretty surprising statistics. The book mentions that a large percentage of people who have affairs actually, get this, report being happy in their marriages.
That's crazy.
Clearly, there's more to this than just like being unhappy.
Definitely. It's not, happy marriage, no affair, end of story.
Right.
There are so many other dynamics at play.
So what are some of those?
Well-
The book mentions a few, starting with something pretty basic.
Right.
Sexual compatibility.
It might seem obvious, but the book really highlights how often men and women have different ideas about what good sex even is.
Right. Like, what does that mean?
It's not just about frequency.
Oh.
It's about feeling desired, connected, understood.
They use the example of Kim and Chris, right?
Yeah.
Who had like totally different definitions
Oh, yeah.
of satisfying sex.
Yeah.
It really shows how open communication is like so important in a relationship.
Yeah.
Without it, you can end up feeling so disconnected,
Absolutely. And that lack of fulfillment, it can make you vulnerable. You might look for it elsewhere.
Another vulnerability the book highlights is inequity.
Okay.
That imbalance in the giving and receiving within the relationship.
Right.
Like the story of Lois, who, after her husband's affair, realized she had been doing way too much
Oh,
while he
man.
was just kind of coasting.
It's the classic, right? Resentment builds
Yeah.
when one partner feels like they're giving, 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 and the other isn't reciprocating.
Right.
And that can push you, to look for that validation, that appreciation somewhere else.
Makes sense. And then there are like child-centered marriages where the couple is so focused on the kids
Yeah.
that their own connection gets like neglected. The book gives the example of Ralph and Rachel, fantastic parents.
Right.
But their romantic relationship was
Yeah.
non-existent.
It's like their ships passing in the night.
Yeah.
United by being parents.
Yeah.
But totally disconnected as partners.
Yeah.
And that emotional distance, it's like a vacuum.
Right.
Easy for someone else to fill.
Which brings us to another tricky stage.
Okay.
Empty nest,
Yeah.
retirement, big life changes.
Definitely. You've got new challenges, anxieties about getting older, maybe even disagreeing about those retirement plans.
Mm-hmm.
The book uses the example of George and Georgia.
Them again?
They almost had an affair because George was laser focused on building their, dream retirement home,
Yeah.
Well, Georgia wanted to travel and experience new things.
So their different visions for the future almost led to infidelity.
Yeah,
It highlights how important it is, I guess, to navigate these transitions together as a couple.
absolutely. It's about adapting to those changing roles and priorities.
Right.
Making sure that relationship itself stays a priority.
And to really get those vulnerabilities, the book emphasizes this thing they call the marital lifeline.
It's basically the unique history of the couple, their patterns, their highs and lows, all the experiences that have shaped their bond.
It's like a roadmap of their relationship, showing how they've navigated challenges,
Right.
evolved.
Right. And the book even breaks down marital love into 3 distinct stages.
Oh, wow.
Stage 1 is all about the romantic projections.
Okay.
You see your partner through rose-colored glasses.
Oh, honeymoon phase.
Stage 2 is where the differences start to show up, leading to power struggles, disillusionment. And finally, stage 3 is where that mature love develops with acceptance, respect, and a more realistic view of each other.
So stage 1's the honeymoon phase, stage 2's where things get real, and stage 3's where you hopefully reach this deeper level of connection.
Exactly. And guess what? The book found that affairs often happen during that messy stage too.
Makes sense. It's a time when couples are grappling with their differences, the realities of a long-term commitment, maybe even questioning if this is even the right person for them.
It's a critical juncture. Couples are just particularly vulnerable to someone offering an escape from those challenges.
So we talked about the story of the affair,
Right.
the story of the marriage, but there's another piece to this, right?
Oh, yeah.
The book argues that it's the individual story.
It's about understanding the unfaithful partner, their personal history, personality, even their values. Infidelity isn't usually just random.
Right.
It's often rooted in deep-seated patterns, beliefs, experiences.
Not Just Friends introduces this idea of an individual vulnerability map.
Yes.
It has zones ranging from safety zone to danger zone.
Think of it as a tool for self-awareness,
Yeah.
for examining those personal factors that might make you more susceptible.
So we've got these maps, right, highlighting these vulnerabilities. But the book also talks about how our attitudes towards infidelity are shaped by, so much more than our experiences.
It's true. The bigger picture, society, not just Friends, talks about this double standard.
Oh, yeah.
It's still around today. The idea that it's okay for men, but not for women.
It's such a classic thing, right? Guys get a pass. Women are supposed to be the keepers of monogamy or something. No wonder so many women feel betrayed, and not just by their partner, but by society's expectations too.
It highlights those ingrained gender roles,
Yeah.
even in cultures that want equality. Research actually suggests that this double standard is stronger in more traditional societies.
It's a reminder that infidelity isn't just personal. It reflects these social norms and expectations we're all swimming in.
Totally. And Not Just Friends dives into another area, something people don't always think about.
Okay.
Work.
Right. The workplace. It's like a breeding ground sometimes.
Right.
Long hours, close to colleagues, shared goals, stress, and maybe even a culture that just ignores those lines getting blurred. Like in the book with Vince.
Yeah.
His coworkers straight up encouraged him to cheat.
Work can provide that connection, validation, even excitement that might be missing at home. And if those needs aren't met in the marriage, it can be a recipe for disaster.
It's true. You spend all day with someone side by side, sharing wins and losses, and suddenly those boundaries get fuzzy.
And sometimes it's even sneakier. There's this feeling that, oh, everyone's doing it, so it's normal.
Right.
It downplays the consequences.
Not just friends, also explores family history.
Interesting stuff.
Right. If our parents were unfaithful, does that impact our own views on fidelity?
Early experiences can be powerful, right?
Hmm.
We might copy those patterns, or sometimes the opposite. We rebel completely.
They share the story about Eric. His dad was openly unfaithful, even took him to gentlemen's clubs, normalized it, and guess what? Eric ended up doing the same thing.
Not surprising. But then you have the other reaction, like Patrick. He was so disgusted by his dad's infidelity that he vowed to be totally different.
Wow.
Put fidelity first in his own relationships.
It shows those early messages, the unspoken stuff from our families, they shape our values, even if we don't realize it.
It's a reminder that our past doesn't have to dictate our future, but it can definitely influence the paths we take.
So we've got the story of the affair, the story of the marriage, the story of the individual, and now these outside forces shaping our choices. Infidelity is way more multi-layered than we give it credit for.
That's what makes Not Just Friends so fascinating. It doesn't have easy answers. It encourages you to go deeper, move beyond just blame, understand all the factors.
Right. It's not about saying it's okay. It's about understanding what makes it more likely to happen in the first place.
And that seems like a crucial step, both for prevention and healing. It allows us to identify those weaknesses, those needs, and create a more conscious, compassionate approach.
So if someone's listening thinking, okay, I see some of this in me or my relationship,
Right.
what can they do? What are the takeaways?
Where the individual vulnerability map is super practical. It's a great place to start, Which zone are you in? What factors are contributing?
It's about honesty, right?
Yeah.
With ourselves.
Yes, and realizing we all have vulnerabilities, those areas where we're more tempted.
Once you've identified them, then what?
Address them head on. Like, if it's an unmet need, can you talk to your partner about it? Work together to fulfill it within the relationship.
Communication, again, is key.
Huge. And not just friends. Stresses understanding your partner's vulnerabilities too.
Oh, right. So it's two-way.
Crucial. It's about creating that space where you can both be honest about needs, fears, even temptations. And remember, vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the basis for, real intimacy.
It's approaching these conversations with curiosity, compassion, not finger-pointing.
Exactly. And if it feels too hard to do alone, therapy can be amazing. A therapist provides that neutral ground, helps you communicate better.
And for those who've already gone through it, whether personally or in their relationship, the book gives hope, right? Healing is possible.
It's tough, no doubt. But with the right support, willingness to rebuild trust, and really understanding, couples can get through it.
It's about moving forward, but with a deeper understanding of yourselves, each other, and how complex these things are.
And that leads to a question we've been dancing around this whole time. If infidelity isn't always a sign of a bad marriage, what's it telling us about our needs, our values as a society, and how commitment is changing in the modern world?
Whoa, that's deep. It challenges us to go beyond those simple answers, really grapple with what it all means.
It makes us think about our personal histories, our culture, how our needs evolve, and how those shape our choices in love.
It's like, if it's not just about bad people or bad marriages, then what is it about? What does it say about being human? Our capacity to connect, but also to hurt.
And another question that really stuck with me is, how much is our childhood still shaping us, our choices in love especially? And what can we do to become aware of those influences so we make better, more fulfilling choices?
It's like we're carrying these invisible scripts.
Yes.
They're impacting how we relate, how we do intimacy, even how we view this whole infidelity thing.
Right. By being more aware of those scripts, those beliefs, those patterns, we can start to rewrite them, create healthier, more authentic relationships.
So it's not about blaming our past. It's about understanding its impact, making conscious choices.
Exactly. It's about empowerment, not being a victim. We have the power to choose how we respond to those early experiences and create the love we want.
Okay, so big picture stuff, the impact of our past. But Not Just Friends also gets into specific vulnerabilities we haven't even touched on yet.
There's so much more. It goes deeper into personal attitudes towards infidelity, needs, and addictions, and how certain childhood experiences play a role.
Let's get into that. What are some of these vulnerabilities it highlights? So those specific vulnerabilities, Not Just Friends, gets into how people justify infidelity, which seems risky.
Right. And makes a distinction between justifications and excuses.
Okay.
Justifications are all about, rationalizing it, even before it happened.
Whoa.
It's like you're making it okay in your head,
Yeah.
minimizing the
Charting
harm.
yourself up.
Totally.
Yeah.
But excuses, those come after.
Right.
It's shifting the blame, saying it wasn't your fault, pointing fingers.
So justifications are the setup,
Yeah,
and excuses are the damage control.
exactly. And there's some wild examples in the book. One guy actually saw his infidelity as a gift to the women he was with.
A gift. Seriously.
Yeah, like he was proud of it almost.
That's extreme. But it shows how differently people see it. The book also mentions a woman who, like, totally regretted it, felt like she'd betrayed everything she believed in.
It's all about those individual beliefs, you
Okay.
know? One person's flaying is another person's ultimate betrayal.
And not just friends, brings up premarital sex, too. Apparently, the more permissive you were before marriage, the more likely you are to cheat later.
It's not a guarantee, but it suggests that early relationship patterns, they can stick with you.
Like, what you do before matters.
Yeah, it's not just about what happens in the marriage, it's what you bring to it.
Okay, so we're carrying baggage. Not just friends. Talks about how those unmet needs can be a huge effect.
Oh, absolutely. That deep need for attention, affection, excitement, we all have it.
And if it's not there in the relationship,
It's a void, just waiting to be filled.
and it's not always about a bad marriage. Sometimes it's just like you need different things or you're not communicating.
Right.
The book talks about running on empty, where people use affairs to escape.
It's a Band-Aid,
Yeah, for a deeper problem.
and it usually just makes things worse.
And sometimes those needs become addictions. Sex addiction, love addiction, even internet addiction.
It's all about that dopamine hit,
Right?
temporary relief. And the internet, with all its secrecy and access, it's a huge trigger.
Temptation 24/7. No wonder infidelity is more common now.
Totally. It's not just finding partners, it's creating these secret lives, these online personas.
So we've got these vulnerabilities playing out, but not just friends takes us back to, like, childhood, too.
It's amazing how those early experiences, those things we learn as kids, they stick with us.
Yeah, our attachment styles, what we expect from intimacy.
It's like a blueprint.
Mhm.
And sometimes that blueprint leads to trouble.
The book highlights some childhood dynamics that can make you more vulnerable, like the spoiled prince.
Oh, yeah.
Grows up expecting to get everything he wants,
Entitlement.
right? Or the less loved child, always looking for validation.
It's sad how those old wounds can affect us.
We keep repeating those patterns even if they're hurting us.
It's powerful stuff, how the past affects the present. But the good news is, if we're aware of those patterns, we can break free.
Okay, so awareness is key. The book also mentions these emotional allergies, which sounds interesting. What are those?
Think of it like you're sensitive to certain things, triggers from your past.
Okay.
And you react like way out of proportion.
Oh, so it's not just the current situation, it's the baggage.
Exactly. Your past is coloring your view, making you overreact.
And in a relationship, this leads to fights, distance, bad communication.
Which all make infidelity more likely.
And of course, we can't forget abuse, especially sexual abuse.
Right.
That can really mess with how you see intimacy and fidelity.
Trauma leaves scars.
Mm.
It affects trust, secure attachments, a whole thing.
It's a reminder that this isn't always just right and wrong.
Yeah.
There's so much more going on.
And that's why understanding is so important. Not to excuse it, but to be more compassionate, you know?
Right. It's about recognizing that healing can happen, but it takes empathy, support, and being willing to dig deeper.
Absolutely. It's about being vulnerable, both you and your partner, realizing we all have those weak spots where we make bad choices.
So, big picture, we've covered a lot. The affair, the marriage, the individual, outside influences, and now these specific vulnerabilities. What's the takeaway from not just friends? What should people remember?
The biggest thing is infidelity is rarely simple. It's not good versus bad people. It's about all these things coming together. Vulnerabilities, relationship stuff, societal pressures.
It's about moving beyond, like, the easy answers.
Right. We all have the capacity to connect, but also to betray.
And knowing this stuff, it gives us power, right?
Huge. By understanding it, we can make better choices, build better relationships, and hopefully be more understanding as a society.
It's not about obsessing over infidelity or being scared of it. It's
Yeah.
about using this knowledge to be more self-aware, more empathetic, have better relationships.
Exactly. And for anyone listening who's maybe dealing with the aftermath of this, whether it's you or someone you love, there is hope. Healing is possible.
It might be a long road.
It might, but with support and the willingness to rebuild and to really understand, it can be done.
Not just friends reminds us that even in the midst of all that hurt and betrayal, there's still hope for understanding, growth, and a deeper, more meaningful love.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of infidelity. We hope you've learned something and that it's made you think more deeply about your own relationships and the choices you make.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep.